Set. I'll call the zoning amendment committee meeting for August 23rd, 2022 to order at 6:03-ish. Any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Update from the chair of alternative housing. Well, okay. Wow. Dinging. Okay, gonna tweak it a little bit. Last night, we voted to move the, what's the best way to word that? The short-term rental. There we go. Slipped my mind to the board. So it's here. And we're still working on
Flexible.
flexible zoning. Thank you so much, Jess. And yeah, I think that's the word we're going to call it. Jess received some things from Paul, I believe, today, because I saw him in my emails about some of it's the Durham's quote conservation subdivision. That's what they call it. But we don't like that word. That we feel it's going to ruffle feathers. Agenda 21 people, the last time we tried to do something on this, they came out of the woodwork and they felt we were communists and whatever else. So hopefully this will be a little bit more appealing. It makes all the sense in the world to me anyway. You save some raw land and it's in that state and you develop portions. We're looking at possibly a sliding scale, giving benefits for smaller homes. Any green features might be an option. We're talking about that. Nothing is in place. So if someone wants to put solar on to try to offset the carbon footprint, I think we ought to put incentives out to try to make that happen. So anything am I forgetting, Jess? I mean, that's quickly to the point.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
That we've been working on lately.
Yeah. And Tara's there. Yeah, there's been a great help. We keep changing minds on poor Tara though. Anyway, why don't we at this point we'll go on to letter B, discussion with Tara and the planning consultant on a short-term rental ordinance. Tara, go ahead.
Sure, and I think you all have it in your packets, right? So you have it in front of you.
Yep.
Yeah, is that right? I'm gonna put it on my screen anyway because it helps me follow along. So the first thing I like to do in working on a short-term rental amendment is to help the board take a step back and look at all of the language in the ordinance regarding how people use rooms and homes as residential uses and as lodging, and then try to pick it back apart a little bit and make sure that we've covered all the different scenarios, all the different combination of rooms and the whole house and transient and not transient, and make sure they're all clearly addressed in some way, and then plug in that last piece of the short-term rental that we tend to think of first, which is renting out our whole home to someone else for vacation. Another thing that kind of tries to guide my work a little bit is that the more we can line things up according to building codes and life safety code categories, we're making life easier for your code enforcement official. So that's behind some of my recommended definitions. And so for starters, I like to use the building code definition of transient, which is not more than 30 days. And that lines up with a lot of different rules and regulations hanging out there. So the first thing you would do if you were to implement the amendment as recommended by the Alternative Housing Committee would be to make a couple of changes in your use table, that's your Article 400, and to change some definitions. And some of these things I've got in this table just so you can see how they all hang together and what uses are allowed now in each zoning district that's like lodging. And then the new row you'd add in your amendments is this last one for short-term rental that I know this is getting ahead of us a little bit, but just so I don't forget to mention this, Jessica, my recommendation is that short-term rental go in section D of that table where you have retail, business and service, because we're trying to make clear that this is not a residential use.
Right.
So I wouldn't put it up in A with the residential uses. I'd put it where you already have hotel, motel, lodging house, bed and breakfast. I think it's
Excuse
just
me,
gonna,
Tara?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you? I don't mean to be rude, but just a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
We have 3 ZBA members here and
Okay.
and the ZBA was not noticed that they were attending the ZAC meeting tonight,
okay,
which is a problem.
okay. What are we to do?
We ran into this a couple years back to where there was 3 members on the ZBA.
Yeah.
I had to post a notice that the ZBA was attending, and then I had to do a separate set of minutes to capture the fact that the ZBA was attending the ZAC meeting.
We don't have 3 members here.
Yes, we do.
You do. 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
3 of us. And then
Sorry, Mark.
just realized that when Frank walked in.
If you want me to leave, I'll leave. I would volunteer to
You
leave.
you don't have to leave. You just couldn't vote. Would that
Right,
make sense?
I would assume that probably would be a safe bet.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify things
Thank you.
before
I
we moved
didn't
any
even,
further.
didn't even think of that. I feel you can participate in the conversations.
Yes,
But just when it comes time for, if there is any vote, that you'll, go ahead.
even though Paul's here as the selectmen's representative.
I was
He's-
just gonna say
he's
that I'm still a ZBA.
right.
I was just gonna say that, but also that you have 3 members here of the planning board.
That's okay.
That's
But this is a
quorum.
planning board
That's
meeting.
okay.
They have
'cause
a
this is
quorum of
planning-
4.
They have a quorum.
They
Yep.
have 7.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. So it doesn't
Okay.
make a difference.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks for noticing that. No,
Yeah.
that's nice job.
So the procedure here is going to be, Frank, you'll have to abstain from any voting. Is that?
That's,
That's
Or
yeah,
Tom or Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Mark.
you answered all those?
I'm glad to. stay.
I can certainly not vote if you want.
Doesn't matter who.
You know, I'm gonna just go by seniority. You've been on the board longer, with these
I'm
things.
good. I'm good with
We'll
it.
just sit with that.
That Mark? Okay.
Did I say something, John?
Okay.
No, being on the,
Sorry.
the amendment committee and making these decisions as we've been on the committee, I would prefer to stay on.
Oh,
Plus-
yeah.
Plus I am a selectman's rep.
Yeah, no, I think that, but again, thank
That
you
sounds
for
fair.
Yeah.
for doing
All right.
that.
Sorry, Mark.
Sorry about that.
But if you want, if it's easy, if you just leave. I'll
No,
leave.
no, you can
No,
stay right
no,
there.
no.
No, it's, no, we appreciate your, your participation. Just can't vote.
But
All
input,
right. So Tara, I guess we got that all sorted out. Sorry about that interruption.
you're lucky you have somebody paying attention to those things.
No kidding.
Not every town does. So,
My mind.
so if you want to go through this table a little bit, and then there's more explanation as we go through into the definitions, but do you have color copies?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so, so the black is what you have in your zoning ordinance now, and then the blue is things that we'd be adding or changing. So we would be, in part of the big picture review of all the lodging stuff, we would want to see you amend the bed and breakfast definition to differentiate it a little bit better from hotels, and say that that's going to be up to 3 to 5 guest rooms used for transient use. And then the benefit of that is that, so most bed and breakfast is somebody's way to keep a house that's too big for them, right? I mean, kind of traditionally. And if you stay up to 5 guest rooms, you stay within the International Residential Code rather than pitching it up to the commercial codes where the house isn't gonna have been built to be sprinklered and have handicap access and all that probably. So it kind of makes the work on your code enforcement and better, more clean cut. You, in your use table, you lump bed and breakfast and lodging house together, but you don't really have a way to talk about non-transient, like a rooming house kind of thing. So we talked about making the lodging house definition to be non-transient. And then again, that's a different codes apply if somebody's living there versus transient use. So splitting them apart makes that cleaner. We talked about different ways people use their homes for income. And what we kind of all agree is a historic accessory use of a home is to have a boarder or two in order to be able to deal with empty nest syndrome without downsizing. Somebody might rent the room out, and you don't want to make life difficult for that person. So as part of these amendments, I'm recommending adding to the definition of accessory that to make clear that if we're talking about non-transit use, we're not putting it on Airbnb, but we're renting it to the Smith's son who's back in town this year, then that's a different thing. And then we're renting 1 or 2 rooms out for transient use for a week or weekend at a time. That's more like a business. And we were recommending that be treated as a home business where John would come in and make sure those rooms have an egress and they have smoke detectors that are working and there's a fire extinguisher in the building, because it's a business that could be putting public at risk if those things aren't followed. And then this new use that we'd be adding, and that this is what would need a new row in section D of the table of uses, would be short-term rental. And the Alternative Housing Committee did not have consensus on whether or not it should be allowed in every district. There was a slight majority favoring not allowing short-term rentals in the residential district because it's closer homes. It could lose the neighborhood feel if you're surrounded by people there partying for the weekend. So the recommendation is to allow it in all of the zoning districts except the residential district. And to accomplish all of this, we have some changes to the definitions on the next page. Do you want to talk about, how do you want to handle this? Do you want to talk about the table a little bit before we go on to the definitions, or would it help understand the table if we did the definitions too?
I think it helps to understand the table if you we run through the definitions as well.
Okay, so on the next page then, as I said, we would recommend clarifying that 1 or 2 rooms in your home for non-transit use, somebody who's going to live there all year, that's an accessory use of a residence. You see, again, the blue would be new language, the black is what you have, and the red would be what we're getting rid of. And bed and breakfast is a little bit of a rewording, but it's also it's limiting to the 5 guest rooms and adding that the owner has to be there overnight, because that also is part of the I'm sorry, I'm spacing out whether that's part of the life safety code or the International Residential Code, but it is in there, and one that basically, in order to qualify for this kind of lower bar, the owner has to be there. So that, again, kind of removes the fear of it becoming like a hostel where nobody's there overnight and all the rooms are rented out. I think that's the kind of scenario that people don't want next door. In home business, I'm just recommending you get rid of the words high impact, because if I worked in your town, I wouldn't know how to implement that. But to add that home business includes 1 or 2 guest rooms in an owner-occupied dwelling. Again, the owner is there, they're highly motivated to make sure things don't get out of control. 1 or 2 rooms. The lodging house also would need the owner or manager overnight. And we're clarifying that it would be for non-transient use. There's somewhere that some places the term owner occupied was used, so we gave that a definition. But people wanted it to be able to be a seasonal dwelling of someone too. So we kind of came up with the idea that the owner has to be physically present for at least 3 months each year. And then the short-term rental definition would be the single-family dwelling or accessory dwelling unit, and we'll talk more about that, offered for transient use, and making clear that we're not talking about a hotel, motel, bed and breakfast. We're talking about something normally used as a residence. And then the definition of transient that will be offered in increments of less than 30 days. This next page I did because there's a lot of discussion about how to deal with accessory dwelling units, because the state law was added to, as well as your zoning provision, to mirror that, to increase affordable housing, which is the accessory dwelling units themselves. But there were good reasons to allow those as short-term rentals, and good arguments not to. So for last night's meeting, I just provided this table that kind of pulled it apart into, well, how are the different ways we could look at it, and what are the pros and cons. And I actually added to this table during the meeting because it occurred to me allowing both the main house and the accessory dwelling unit short-term rental isn't consistent with your zoning, because you require a owner to be there. So that just kind of knocked one out of the running. If you don't allow either the main house or the ADU as a short-term rental, I think that you may be providing a disincentive to people to add an ADU on, because it limits what they can do with it. And it then they're not able to use that to generate income to stay in their home, which was one of your goals. There was a lot of discussion about allowing the main house to be offered as a short-term rental, but not the accessory dwelling unit, so that the accessory dwelling unit met its purpose of affordable housing. But the downside of that is you're discriminating a little bit, because the resident who needs the economic support of it would have to move out of their home and into the accessory dwelling unit. So that kind of landed the committee on number 4, which would leave it up to the owner. They could have one or the other offered as a short-term rental, but never both. So that would let somebody generate some income if they needed to put a new roof on or pay the taxes or whatnot. but it has the potential to not have that accessory dwelling unit be an affordable housing unit that's available. So it's not a perfect solution, but that's where they landed. And then there was a lot of, agreement that it's not going to be a carte blanche, but there's some things that somebody needs to show John before they get their permit for their short-term rental. And that's the next page. This would be a new section in the zoning ordinance, somewhere in the 360s, depending on what else goes in there, that would say, first, it has to have a safe access, so in case the person calls 911 and needs an ambulance or fire truck. There has to be adequate room to park cars on their property so that there aren't 8 cars parked out front on the road in the way of vehicles. We need to make sure that the number of people in that home are lined up with what the septic permit says it's for, and that the septic permit functions, that the water is safe, that the main thing on number 5, I'm sure that John's going to go in and look for are smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and safe egress from everything being used as a bedroom. And then here in number 6, we're clarifying that this is where we'd say that if you have an ADU, you can only use one or the other as a short-term rental. The rest of this handout is just some miscellaneous stuff I noticed while I was reading these different sections. That, this bunkhouse section you want to clarify that it can't be a separate short-term rental because you've said that they can't have bathrooms in a bunkhouse. Hotel and motel, I just, again, happened to be looking at your definitions for different lodging and noticed they didn't line up. This just happens over time when you do amendments every year and things end up not being quite lined up with each other. Same with dwelling unit and continuing care retirement, because you said you defined dwelling unit as having cook-in, but then you had this dwelling unit continuing care retirement where you say with or without kitchen, so that conflicted. So I think the easiest way to deal with that is just get rid of that second one and qualify your dwelling unit definition. Similarly, I was looking at everywhere you use the terms dwelling unit to make sure that we're consistent in what that is. And I just offered a little bit of cleanup here to your continuing care language.
Thank you.
What else? Similar with again, I saw dwelling in this special exceptions in Lakeshore, and I thought you'd not necessarily, it looked like it didn't necessarily mean dwelling units, but also lodging units. So I fixed that a little bit. And then number 6, one thing that I afraid I became a broken record on to the committee is when anybody talks about short-term rentals, there's a lot of conversation about the bad behavior of certain guests and tenants, and the zoning ordinance just isn't the place you can deal with the people. It's where you have to look at the building itself and things like the egress and the parking. If you want to manage the behavior of the people, the way to do that after the zoning ordinance is amended so that your zoning ordinance clearly says you can have short-term rentals, then the next step would be for the select board to adopt something under this provision called, it's 4111C, and it's very short, and it just basically says the select board can adopt regulations for businesses. So that's where the municipal association has recommended that you put the regulations that issue a permit that's renewable every year or two, has to have a yearly inspection where you can manage the number of guests and it's a lot easier to crack down on violations with this. Zoning violations are so hard to enforce and you have to go to court, whereas this can just be a local citation. So, and it's where you'd ask for an emergency contact. Then
If you can stop for a second, Tara, I had an idea that popped in my mind when we have the contact list and things of that nature. Maybe it would be good for the Board of Selectmen to institute the Knox box system on any of these rental properties. Inside that, there will be a key to the house. Also, contact people are inside that box, and the fire department only has that key. I think that could be a good way of 2 o'clock in the morning, someone trying to find, okay, who's the guy that comes here and solves this problem? You're never going to find it. We got to have it there. And so my thought.
yeah, you'd have to ask town council whether the town can require that. I'm not sure you can.
What's that?
I'm not sure the town can require it. You'd want to ask.
Oh, absolutely. They can. They
Yeah?
can. No doubt about it.
Yes.
Yeah. And this has people in it. I think it would be a very good way to have the information, be able to gain access on site if need be, at any hour of the day or night.
So you weren't interrupting me because I was at the end of the list. So, questions, comments? For Alternative Housing Committee did a great job, ready to move on.
Yeah, I think we covered all angles as much as we possibly could with short-term rentals and the accessory dwelling. That's something we didn't discuss as having a knockbox.
No, we didn't.
We never discussed that. That's
Just came
something
to
else
mind.
that just came to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that could be implemented and
Very easily.
included in that with the selectmen's input for the permit process. I'm sure that, I mean, yes, the selectmen can put something like that on.
Yeah. They're all over town.
I'm just curious, in this day and age of Airbnbs, getting enforcement or compliance to something like this, how realistic is it to do it?
Well, let's put it this way. If there's a furnace problem in the wintertime, let's say, it may not be just people problems. It could be a structure problem.
Yeah.
And you'd need to have the manager who is identified be able to get them, because every place might have a different building manager,
No, realistically, it's a start.
It's a start.
It's a
It's just-
start of controlling and not controlling, but helping to know who does and who doesn't have short-term rentals, and putting it in a permitting process allows the selectmen to put conditions, which things like being, if they don't comply, there can be conditions put on like a fine. If if it's a permitting process and they're permitted to do so, it's good for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, whichever is decided
As long
on.
as there's some teeth in it, then
That's the teeth.
Yeah.
The teeth is the permit.
Yeah, you could revoke that.
You can
permit.
revoke
Right,
that. You
right.
take that away. You could have a
I'm
first
just worried that
offense.
not everyone is going to go that route of a permit, and
well, if they get caught, they're going to get shut down.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's how you're going to have to do it.
because so many of these, are operate under the radar at this
Right,
point.
of
to be
course they are.
realistic
Yeah.
about it.
But it's a start.
In the Knox box system, people say, well, I don't want people to have access to my house. The fire department has key to every bank in town. They can get into the supermarket. So in a lot of houses, the large houses, if you have an alarm system, you're supposed to have a Knox box.
I thought part of the definition of short-term rental is you couldn't have an employee, so you wouldn't have.
We want someone who is responsible to the property. So if we get there or someone gets there and needs further diffusing of an
different-
issue or whatever, the contacts are in that box.
Either
Different
manager or
issue.
owner.
Different issue. You mentioned that you thought that there might be a property manager. I thought
Well,
for short-term rental, you can have
we're
one.
requiring it. That'll be part of the selectmen's requirement. Someone has to be responsible that can respond within 20 or 30 minutes to this location. If the owner is in Florida, he's not going to get here. So therefore the problem can't be taken care of.
But that person can't be an employed person by this definition, right?
They would be an employed person, but
But
not on a
what we're saying for the
Which
short-term
definition are you
rentals-
looking at, just so I'm clear?
I don't know, I caught it as it went by. For short-term rental, you can't have an employee, it said.
I
Well,
don't know.
this isn't really considered employee. This is
It's a contract person.
a contract person that has they can take and make decisions about the property.
Okay.
Don't you have it in front of you too, don't you, on paper? Because I don't,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're referring to because we don't have anything about that.
I don't remember seeing that.
No, we don't have, you certainly could. I mean, it's most common to have a property manager who manages several in a town.
okay, then maybe I misread it, which is possible. I'm not gonna vote anyhow, so.
No, we would want them to have a property manager in town ideally.
The home business, maybe that's where I caught it, does not have any non-resident employees.
Yeah, this would be someone residing on the property as an employee. That would not be necessary for the short-term rental.
So for
So
short.
what you're, one second, what you're looking at is your current definition of home business,
Mhm.
right? That it's in black. And
Yes.
so that means people going to work in the home. That's their place of work, not that I mean, you might be paying a cleaning person, a landscaping person and a manager. Those aren't considered non-resident employees at a home business. We mean, when you put that definition in your home business definition, you mean people who go to work there all day.
Right.
It's a little clear, but I'm with you. Thanks.
Well, if it's unclear, to you, it might be unclear to someone else. So we probably ought to sharpen that up a little bit. So it's clear.
Yeah, it's
about
pretty-
the Knox box, right? That makes total sense to me, but.
It's pretty
your point
to-
was having
It's
a-
pretty standard language for home business.
Okay.
Which
So-
means I've been looking at it 30 years, so it looks fine to me. It doesn't mean it's clear to everybody.
John, go ahead.
Can I jump in here, Mark? The point is that if you have a short-term rental and you live in Florida, there's going to be someone locally that we can access that information or have it on file. That if there's an issue, they can be present, become present.
And make a decision if need
And
be.
it's like if you have you got an LLC here in the state, you have to have a resident, someone who's in the state, a representative of your LLC, if I remember correctly.
So I'm with you, John, but I think that's where the contradiction is, right? Because as I read this, and maybe I'm wrong, but my interpretation of this is if you go short-term rental at all, it is a business, right? We're gonna treat it, that's what that chart said.
That's true.
We're treating it as a business. If it's a business, the business doesn't, a home business wouldn't have an on-site sign, whatever.
Yeah, but 1 second, we're not calling a short-term rental a home business.
Yeah, it's got its own
It's
definition.
not.
Okay,
It's not a home business. It's a business. The home business is if you live in the home and you rent 1 or 2 rooms out on Airbnb.
so if you rent a property for more than 14 days, I think, is it by state or by federal? It can't be considered it has to be treated as a business. But you have to file a tax return for that. Short of 14 days, I don't think you even have to.
No, if
well,
you're in the business, like,
So
you have to have rooms and meals tax for the state of New Hampshire.
if it's over 14 days. I
No,
think it's-
no.
We're
Number
going
one,
on 14. I'm afraid you guys are getting a little bit off track, though. I think,
Maybe I.
yeah, well, they just need to be clear, Tara. So we're just trying to
yeah,
get
but
rid
what
get rid of the fog.
the planning board, I think, is looking for from you is recommendations regarding the zoning amendment. And you guys are talking a lot more about the select board regulations.
Probably.
Okay.
Well,
I'm good.
Like all this
Yeah,
stuff
we got a
about
question.
rooms and meals tax and managers and all that, that relates to the the select board regulations, that would be a next step.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And also, if you rent something, dollar number one is taxable.
But things-
You can depreciate and expense stuff off, but it's taxable.
Actually, from a federal perspective, it's not. It takes 2 weeks. It's 14 days.
So the things I think,
But the state is not.
Right.
I don't think
the
so.
things I think we're hoping to get your feedback on are like, well, what do you think about allowing short-term rentals in every district except the residential? And did we land on the right compromise with the accessory dwelling units?
Well, last night, the committee discussed the residential at length, and we decided to keep the residential out of the rental business for these short-term rentals.
Went to a vote.
We had a physical vote.
Physical vote.
That was number 4. That was the preferred option then?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
he's talking about the residential district.
yeah. I'm only talking about short-term.
rental,
Yeah, yeah.
Where it has the N
Right.
for no.
Right.
Yeah.
Before that, there was yes across the
Right,
board.
understood.
And then it was discussed whether or not to have it in the residential zone. And by vote, it was shot down to not allow in the residential zone.
Right.
The residential zone is small and very well established. I mean, there's not much more that could be added to the residential zone because of built out.
It's the realities.
Right.
So
Okay,
my,
Ted.
my
Okay.
only real concern is, I think everything looked great to me, by the way, and I can follow where the thinking went and how you got to where you got to. How in the world are we going to present this to the public for voting? Because as it is, this is going to get a lot of no's just because it's too much information for them to absorb.
Well, it's not gonna look like this. I'm gonna help Jessica put it in a format that,
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
we-
the definitions, I think we can break those down. Some of those we should probably look at as administrative that don't need to go to vote on some
so
definitions.
I'm not sure. I've seen that in your notes in the past, and that's something that Jessica and I probably need to talk about more, but I think they should all be going to town meeting.
Mhm.
And
We
what,
really have,
We'd go to deliberative session,
right.
and that's where that would be explained.
Well,
No,
Why wouldn't it?
deliberative is money only. It has never been zoning.
Zoning, no.
Okay.
The
All right.
planning board here, the
Okay.
planning board hearings in January are where the public has the opportunity to hear
That'd be
what's
December.
being said about the zoning amendments.
right, so
So they would just go to a meeting.
we're gonna,
I think we need to have a really crackerjack rationale.
Yeah.
well, we'll write all this in. It should all live together as one amendment. But we'll have a simple, clear explanation, and these tables are just to help us organize our thoughts. They won't be on the amendment language.
Right.
But we'll have a clear, easy to understand and, narrative that says the purpose of the amendment is to allow people to rent 1 or 2 rooms in their homes as a home business, or in every district except residential to rent out the whole home as a short-term rental. I mean, it'll be clear what people are doing if they vote yes.
That was my confusion. You just said it again, right? Where it's short-term rentals, they use their home as a home business.
No, 2 different things. Look at the last 2 rows of the table on the first page. We're talking about 2 different uses. 1 or 2 rooms in your home. Why? Like I always give the example of the bed and breakfast I stayed at in Newfoundland. When we got there, it was just somebody's home, and they rented 2 rooms. And they were there, and it was kind of weird. But that's, what the kind of thing we'd allow as a home business. But if you're renting you bought a home to put on Airbnb, that's a business. That's not a home business. You're not there. You're in Florida, like was said.
I see you. I see it.
It's
What
tweaking.
happens with the folks that live here, their residence is here? They go to Florida for the winter for 2 months and rent their house.
Yeah.
That's
If they
gonna be
rent it on a
short-term
long-term rental,
That's gonna be a short-term rental if they are offering it for by the week or weekend.
The long-term rental is not subject to rooms and meals tax, or any of that, but I don't know the exact cutoff date on how many days it is, but if you.
It's more than
to someone for a year, I do not pay rooms and meals tax on that income.
But to build on that point, the one thing that is not defined in here is non-transient. And it would be beneficial to have that in the definitions as well, because what we're talking about is that's a non-transient application, basically.
I agree with that, definitely. But I also think you have a different, or maybe my interpretation again is still wrong. But you have a different problem. If in the example we were using, where somebody goes to Florida and they got 3 months of an open window here, if they go Airbnb and rent it by night, that's short-term rental, right?
That's short-term
That's
rental.
right.
But if you rent it, if you're gone for 6 months and you rent it the whole 6 months to one individual,
Let's go back to the other one though. Maybe that's where I'm not, thank you for clarifying on the non-transient, because I think that would help too. But I'm confused though. If you've got a house, you go to Florida for a month, you rent it for 3 or 4 days, 5 days, 12 days, doesn't matter, right? As long as it's less than 30, right? That's short-term rental, but it's also home business.
No, it's just a short-term rental.
I think I see what the problem is.
Yeah.
Home business is you're living in the house and you rent a room to me and a room to Bill for transient. Okay, so we're coming, but you're still living in that house. And that's the definition of a home business. By definition, our ordinance is a home business is you live in that house and you perform your business in that house.
So maybe you can help me then, because if I go to Florida for a month and a half and rent my house for 4 days, I'm not still a resident of New Hampshire?
yes, you are.
And I don't still live in that house?
Yeah,
I
It's
do,
not a residency, but you're not occupying.
You're not
but I
occupying at the
still
same
live in the
time.
house. That's my house.
if you live
So
in this
that's the
community
issue I'm
for
trying to get.
180 days, you can claim this as your residency.
I think you need to look at the language that we were offering to add to your home business definition. We don't just say it's the residence, we say they're present overnight.
I know that one of the issues that came up in the zoning board discussion, and I'll get past this in a second, I will. Right, but one of the issues that came up in the zoning board, the ZBA discussion, was I'd hate to live next door to the guy who's gonna move into my house for 3 days because he won't take care of it. And there'll be loud party or something like that. It was something along those lines. You get the point.
Yep.
Right? Which is, I think, what we're trying to cover here.
And that's part of the gist of why
So,
we're having this. Because people have experienced those exact problems.
So I go away on vacation from my house. Where's my residence? It's still my
Still there,
house.
still your house.
Right? I still live there.
Yep.
Right.
Go away for a 2-week vacation. I rent the house for 3 days next to Frank's house. The guy has a huge party. It's still a problem.
That Frank's a
I
problem
think that's what
anyway.
we're not covering. Isn't that something we're not covering here?
No, that's a short-term rental. If you're not sleeping there overnight while the guests are there, that's a short-term rental.
Okay. All
So
right.
Look
I
at the definition.
scribbled in a little note in one of these definitions, and maybe this is where this gets clarified. And I only did it under bed and breakfast, but it says an owner occupied single family dwelling where the owner or a live-in manager is present overnight, where 3 to 5, and I had just scribbled in where and when, or, to try and emphasize that the owner is there at the same time as those 3 to 5 guest rooms are being occupied.
But that's a bed and breakfast.
It's a bed and breakfast.
That's
I know,
under
I
bed and breakfast.
just happened to be.
Right, but we have the same language in home business. We say,
So that same kind
Present
of
overnight.
application of, saying at the same time, the owner is occupying at the same time as these rooms are being rented.
Yes.
I don't know if that would help clarify this question.
okay, is that where the confusion is?
Does say it.
It does say that. You're
It
right.
does say it. It does say owner occupied dwelling.
I'm gonna let
It
it go.
specifies that in the home and bed and breakfast.
No, I know, but the confusion here is he's saying that he's the residency confusion.
Mhm.
And all I was saying is that maybe clarifying that it's owner occupied while the transient rental is there.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
So,
Back to the knockbox. I think the knockbox is a great idea.
so,
Okay, thanks. Frank, go ahead.
so short-term rentals. We have a lot of short-term rentals in Alton, especially on the lake and surrounding areas. And this is the definition now of short-term rentals, because it's not going to be a hotel, motel, lodging house, bed or breakfast.
Right.
But it's a single residence. So those short-term rentals, because that's where enforcement has been the biggest issue in some areas that I'm aware of, that the code enforcement where some people have bought these for investments, okay, to make money. They have no intention of ever living there.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And we didn't want to discourage that because there's an awful lot of them.
It's free market.
Right.
Plain and
I
simple,
think
free
there's over
market.
60 in Alton.
There's over 60. Okay.
That you know of.
That we know of.
No, I
Thank
mean,
you.
that we know. Right.
That was right here too.
Stress, you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
Right,
Okay.
that we know of. Okay. So we're gonna put these other rules, and what we're gonna try to do is have the select board permit those rentals.
Correct.
And what we're trying to distinguish is there's a big difference between a home business and a short-term rental. Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah,
It's
I
hard.
I don't think the two
It's a category.
blend, to be honest with you. A short-term rental is a short-term rental, even though it is a business. But doing the business is, you work for me, you come to my house and you work.
I thought I
Do
heard
whatever
you
you do.
say, and I thought I heard you say, but we're not classifying it as a business. How can you not classify a short-term rental as not a business?
It is a
It
business.
is a business,
We're looking at it as such.
right?
Okay,
And that's why it should be listed in,
But it doesn't come under home business.
Doesn't fit the category of home business if you rent out your house and you're not there.
right.
A home business is where the business, the
Is-
owner occupies the, Sarah Marsimo came to us this last meeting for a daycare, which is her home business. There's a lady up on Powder Mill Road that does sewing,
right.
all right, in her home. That's a home business.
business.
She lives there. She works there.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking this, okay, should we incorporate in short-term rental businesses?
No, because it's all a business.
I know.
Maybe I'll ask that question a different way. Do we need the definition of a home business in this?
Oh, yeah, I feel we definitely do.
It's
Because
not
there's
a home
lots of
business.
home businesses around. I mean, we've got to address home business because
It exists.
people have them.
And it's a growing thing with more and people because of the COVID situation, and we had more and more people
Well,
working.
let me
in
use-
That's
let me
separate
use-
and distinct. Home, I have a home business as well. And it's a separate and distinct discussion from a short-term rental situation, as I would see it.
Right, but you.
That's why we're defining them differently.
Right, can I
Yeah, absolutely,
try to
Jess.
take a stab at it?
Yeah, go for it.
Please.
So, page 2, this list of definitions.
Yeah.
So while working on short-term rental, Tara realized all of these other definitions needed to be tweaked.
Okay,
So that's why home business,
That pulled
that's
it
why
to-
we're talking about home business.
okay.
Otherwise, we
tweaking
wouldn't be talking
definitions
about
for
home
a
business.
long
at all.
time.
If the language wasn't.
Just
the
got
si-
pulled in
Yeah,
by
so that's
default.
why we're
Okay.
talking about all of these other uses, because the language wasn't consistent.
Because we want to make clear that there's something different than a short-term rental.
In each one.
The real important is the language be consistent.
Mhm.
That's because our previous attorney said he could not defend it with it scattered all over the place, all these different definitions.
Got it.
And so that's why we're trying to standardize the definitions.
Why Tara went back into lodging houses and owner occupied businesses and businesses to classify and explain on each one, the differences.
It is a little tight, right? Because if you owned a home business and you wanted to do a short-term rental and you happen to not stay there that night, but it's still your house. And it's really a very fine line.
Yeah.
You know, and there's,
And we,
John.
Okay,
balancing act.
agreed.
It's a balancing act.
And, you know,
There's no perfect answer.
Except my answer is that it's a fine line. It's a really important line because if I'm in the home and I have people renting rooms, their behavior may be a lot different than if I'm not in the home.
Except
And
if I'm the
how
guy-
it impacts the neighborhood's gonna be different.
unless I'm the guy renting it, and it only applies to the one zone, right? It only applies to residential.
resident,
difference.
the short-term rental is not going to be allowed in residential.
Right, but the home businesses,
Home business, right?
and the day that somebody calls me on it, I had planned to stay there at night. I just didn't.
I'm not knocking on a door to find out if you're there.
That's right, nobody is, right? I'm with
And
you.
the thing,
It will be. If it
I guess it's a lot of
becomes an issue, it'll
things.
become apparent.
and every electrician,
Good point.
You know,
Plumber,
it's
carpenter,
can't run around and check.
they go do their thing and they come home and they do their stuff at home. And that's technically they're operating a business, but my goodness, you just can't chase that stuff.
Splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
What's happening.
Something like that sits under the other part, the lower part of the home business where if you don't have any, you know,
People
if you're
coming
just
and
running an
going.
office and doing your office work there, that's not a home, you know,
That's not
anything
infringing.
that rises the level of.
But that almost doesn't, I'm with you, but if you had a home business, you could still rent out 2 of your rooms. That would
Yeah.
qualify as a home business if you
But it's
stayed there.
considered a home, it's considered one of a home business definition.
Yeah, that's right. And you could do that in a residential neighborhood, right? And you could kind of do the same thing.
But you can't do the short-term rental,
If you're not gonna
Right.
stay there that night,
right?
it's,
Or period. We axed out residential allowed, period.
unless you're gonna stay there that night in that in that house.
Short-term rentals in the residential zone are not
Are
going
not
to
allowed.
happen,
Right.
period.
But if you're home
But
and
if
you're
you see-
leasing out one of your rooms for a couple of nights in the residential zone, that's okay.
Right, and that's a good point.
That's the
It is.
Or if
John
it's a
said we should
separate
have
building
no here,
on your
no
property,
there.
part of it.
same deal.
Residential.
Oh, in the residential, for
Yeah.
accessory dwelling, yeah, and
Yeah.
home business.
So Tara, I think,
I think that, but to answer that question or that point is, we also look at that differently is if you're living there and you're renting out a couple of rooms, the amount of control over that situation
quite good,
is quite good.
right?
Yeah, and we're talking about 1 or 2 rooms. This is a specific limit.
Right.
So, you know, you're not going to be renting out 6 rooms in your house. Then you go into another category of something, a hotel, motel, whatever. you know?
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
you've moved beyond that.
Right.
Lodging house, yeah.
So,
Yeah, lodging house is probably the best word for that, yeah.
all right.
Okay,
I-
I think it's a spectacular and, you know, the fact that you did go back and found all these little tweaks is amazing. And yeah, it is a little confusing. I spent a lot of time reviewing this when you emailed this out and I had questions scribbled all over the place. I reread it about 14 times. And that's what makes me nervous about presentation. And that's why I bring that up is we all know that
well, if the
there's too
questions
much to
arise that we've just had here, we have problems.
right. But if there's too much volume to read, you know, when you're sitting in, you know,
The voting
making a
booth.
vote, you know, it's going to just be a no. It's
Well, and one of the things we do to prevent that is we don't put it all in there.
Yeah.
You know, we provide rationale documents to hand to people, hand them out, put them on the website, put them on here, put them on Facebook, put them everywhere we can so that people can review it. We're still going to get people that are going to not read it or say, no, it's, you know, they're fascists and they're trying to govern every step of our life and keep us from making. you're always going to get that. We have those people in town who, no matter what we put up, no matter how well we explain it, they're going to spin it the other way.
Yes.
We do the best we can.
And what
Yes.
you want to do so that people don't feel like they're seeing different stories is when we put together the summary language that's going to be on the ballot, you'll use that in your public hearing notice, and you'll use it as the introduction to the detailed handout.
Yes.
I think another question we might want to be prepared for is the whole, if it's in the house and I'm staying upstairs in a room and I have two guests down, that's one thing, like you guys were talking about control. If I'm staying in my house and I'm living upstairs and the accessory unit, because this does cover that as well, is 100 feet away, and that has 2 bedrooms in it, how much control do I really have?
Well, you're responsible for it, plain and simple. And if you
I
have,
need the answer. I just think.
no,
that's
I
my
will
question.
answer, I will answer that, because if the permit that the town issues, they're talking either 1 or 2 year permit. And if you have multiple problems, your permit will be taken from you and you can't operate.
And
So
that's-
there's an incentive to keep your nose clean.
One of the things we talked about is actually having, in that, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 strikes. And if your first one is a first offense would be X amount of dollars, second and the third would be revoked. If it's not followed through.
I just think that's something that somebody might ask.
Yeah. And the short answer to that is you certainly would have more control being 100 feet away than when you're in Florida.
Exactly.
I think there's kind of a self-selecting too, to people that are gonna have a party, stay somewhere that the landlord is present.
You always invite them, right?
But don't we have a number of properties where we have these accessory units? We have a house and people rent out these accessory, there's a number of them, it seems like.
And also.
I gotta believe we're not vetting to the level, I mean, I hear you, Tara, but I gotta believe those people don't vet to the level that Tara's
Well,
suggesting.
it was brought to our attention last evening that Airbnb was one of them. They have a non-party policy
That's right.
in their rental agreement. So we were told that with COVID, they installed that. And then just this past spring, they made it a permanent thing, because I'm sure people have had problems. I mean, I get it. I mean, come to my place and there's 50 of them there, and that's where the problem lies.
Basically, the ones that go with the Airbnb or another company, the larger companies, they have their rules and regulations as well that they have to follow. And they rate people for their stay and for that don't stay. The ones that fall through the cracks are the ones that don't go through anybody and they just rent them out themselves and do it without any supervision at all. And there's a certain amount of those, but that's very difficult to control.
Like you said, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you.
We try to, and the goal with zoning, when you're making zoning amendments, is you try to make them as thought out and as inclusive as possible. So you don't have to try to keep going back to the well on the same subject to the voters.
Right.
Because that's a big, I don't, wouldn't just throw it out. Okay. And then we'll diddle with it this year and then ask them to read
Tweak
it
it again.
ask them to vote on it again. And then ask them, we don't want to do that. We don't want to keep asking the voters to vote on the same thing every year, if avoidable. So that's why we try to do this way.
Oh, is that like Obamacare? Let's pass it and then figure out what.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
So what should our next steps be for this? It sounds like you want a couple of revisions. I wasn't sure if I heard somebody mention adding a non-transient definition. I wasn't sure if that was consensus that that's needed, and that we need to make even more clear that the person that present overnight means at the same time. I was trying to avoid, some towns are using the term hosted and then define hosted as there, but I think that almost makes you think that it's not the owner. So I was trying to skip that, but.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea to avoid that, because if you look on the Airbnb and all those sites out there, that they refer to the homeowner who is not present at the dwelling as the host.
Right. So Do
Yeah,
we,
but if I'm a person renting a house, and if it's 3 months or 6 months or a year, I want to know, that I fall within that non-transient definition too.
Yeah, and that's,
say that again?
So what he was doing was defending the need for a definition for non-transient to make sure that an individual who is renting for 90 days couldn't be confused with a transient.
So, yeah, and
What,
if they're, just one thing though, if they're renting, if it's offered by the weekend, the night, the week, and they happen to choose to stay there 8 weeks, that's still a transient rental unit. So what we're talking about is the one that's offered for increments of less than 30 days, not how long, we're not talking about how long the person's there, but we're characterizing it as the thing that can't get a month lease or a month-to-month lease. It's on Airbnb as a vacation thing.
So sorry. So if you do rent it for 8 weeks, even though it was offered for, 1 week increments, you're still a
Yeah, I
transient.
understand what you're saying.
That's still a transient use of that building.
and not to be confused with an apartment.
Right, because we're regulating the structure, not the occupant.
Right.
But say I'm an individual who rents month to month then, and I don't sign a long-term lease, how does that get handled then?
Well,
That's 30 days.
That's still
Yeah.
non-transient.
But,
That's a tenant at will.
what's
yeah,
that?
that's,
It's a tenant at will.
yeah.
Yeah, that's non-transient.
Okay, I understand why you don't want to put the definition in, but it's a pretty thin line here at some level.
Right. So we'll do a search for non-transient and make sure we're not gonna break anything else if we add a definition that says that.
Okay.
And then, so
Hold
we'll
on,
do that.
hold on, Tara, hold on, please. Mr. Bober has something.
There's an RSA 48A, says the housing standard statute defines short-term rental or vacation rental. Individually, collectively owned single-family house or dwelling unit, any unit or group of units.
Move your mic. Move his mic down.
Occupied residential is offered for a fee for less than 30 consecutive days.
Yeah.
So that's.
So that is per the RSA.
Yeah. that's
It uses that 30-day, less than 30
less than
days.
30 days.
Weren't you reading from the housing regulations though? Because,
I think he was reading from revised statutes annotated.
yeah, but the housing statute says that can't be applied differently to short-term rentals versus residential. So I don't think we want to be holding that in. That's the statute that says that you can regulate rentals in general. But I don't think you do that. Anyway, so I think we have those to-dos, right? The non-transient definition to make sure we wouldn't break anything. We have that, and make clear that present overnight means at the same time. Does this need to come back to this committee again, or can that go to the Alternative Housing Committee and then the planning board, or what are the steps here? Or can it go right to the planning board with those changes?
We should probably review the term non-transient to make sure that this committee feels it's correct.
Okay, so it'll come back to you guys.
Yeah, and I think Tara, I'm gonna work with you on reformatting this for the next meeting. And then,
To look like the amendment would.
yeah, so I already use an existing format, so I don't know if you want me to plug it in to my format and you can take a peek at it, or I don't know what you want to do.
Then why don't you send me that? Send me an example,
Yeah, I'll send you like last year's or something.
and because I mean, there's some stuff we're gonna take out of here because it doesn't have anything to do with it, but
Right.
I'm not convinced that we should be going down the avenue of defining non-transient.
In your rationale?
My rationale is that we have a definition for transient
Mhm.
and non,
It's the rest.
that definition is non-transient.
Point.
So I.
If you don't
I'm thinking
meet the
less words are
transient-
better.
If you're not transient, you're not.
But then you
Right.
should
You-
take
you can't be
non-transient out of
both.
the text.
Say that again?
Then I think you should take non-transient out of the text.
But non-transient
Where is
is
it?
simply does not meet the definition of transient.
Yeah, I understand your rationale, but I'm trying to see if there's anywhere in the language that actually talks about non-transient people.
Yes, there is. That's how we differentiate between lodging house and bed and breakfast. For example.
I don't know that you can get away with doing that, in my opinion.
How about instead of saying for non-transient use, saying not for transient use?
I feel that would be a very confusing wording myself.
Yeah, I,
Look, either you're a resident or you're a transient
Or,
person.
or non-resident. You know, either you're a resident, and if you're not a resident, then you're a non-resident.
Well, that would be an interesting point. Is there a definition of resident and a separate definition for non-resident?
Oh, I would imagine there is, because I'll use Gunstock. If you're a resident, you get a cheaper ski ticket. If you're a non-resident, you pay full boat.
I mean, most towns go with the state's definition for residency, criteria for a residency, rather than trying to define it in your zoning.
Well, Tara, let's come up with a non-resident definition, and then we'll wait through that.
Non-transient.
Non-transient, pardon me, thank you.
And we'll toss that one around. And then for the list of recommendations, which I assume we would be forwarding to the select board.
Yes,
The 1, 2, 3rd one down states maximum 2 guests per approved bedroom plus 2 additional guests per dwelling unit,
right.
which I think is a very reasonable.
The rationale
limit.
was there to cover the hideaway bed or something like
Right.
that.
What about the visitors of the guests?
Not overnight.
not overnight.
So until 1 or 2 in the morning, but then you got to leave.
Well, if they
Good luck.
they can stay till 3 o'clock in the morning. They just got to be quiet. You know, because the noise ordinance comes into effect at 11
At
o'clock.
11 o'clock. Right.
That's a girls' school dorm. You know, just a quick nit.
So on that one, before we move on, did you want to add overnight to the third bullet? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, no overnight guests, I think would be a very
Add it to it.
good
Yeah.
thing to add there, because
So maximum of 2 overnight guests per approved bedroom.
That would be better.
yeah,
Just a quick nit on the chart, Tara, on page 1, under the 4th, row down, the 5th row down, accessory and home business. I think under type of rental, that's where you should say accessory and home business, and then the boxes should say yes or why.
That's not gonna be in the table at all.
Oh, it won't be there.
This is
Okay.
for our use.
This is to show you
Just to
the
confuse us.
effect that the
Perfect. It worked. It worked.
it's to show you the effect of the language we're gonna add to the definitions.
Yep, thank you. It worked.
Okay. So the question I think was, where do we go from here? And I
So
think,
it sounds like you guys want to see those tweaks, so I'll
more
work with
time.
Jessica on that and
Yeah.
get it back.
Before it goes any further.
yeah, and I can tell you, I would love to see a version 2 of what we think we're going to present.
Yeah, I think that's what Jessica's asking, that
Yeah.
that we work together on.
with
gonna
the
do-
rationale.
She's gonna do that with the rationale with her.
Good. Okay, good.
Okay, is there anything else for Tara this evening?
I think I was just gonna give a real quick rundown on where we're at with the flexible zoning, not to get into the weeds on it tonight, because the alternative housing committee has just started
Mhm.
talking about that, right?
Yep,
But
Yes.
we just talked about it for the first time last evening.
Right, so just, maybe I don't even need to put it on the screen, but just, I mean, the basic idea there is to, it's almost gonna be, I wrote a lot size averaging model years ago because a lot of towns didn't like the term cluster. You weren't alone in that, people hear cluster and they picture, 20 McMansions and
Kind of like funnel
and
development.
urban landscaping and all that. So, and the idea was that you could use the same concept for a smaller subdivision that just lets a farmer keep more of the land in the farm or a wetland or whatever. And then there's something else floating around out there called cottage developments. We're starting to see in some other states where they're subdivisions where the homes are clustered and they're smaller size. They might be 400 square feet, they might be 1,400 square feet, depending on what they consider a cottage, right? So what we talked about with the committee is kind of a merger of those concepts with a little bit of the conservation subdivision idea too. So that we'd be offering people the opportunity to have smaller lots or even no lot lines, have the homes concentrated in one part of the lot. They save money on the utilities, they save money on the road, they might have shared wells and septic. And then because there are a lot of master plan recommendations about trying to increase the variety of housing and help people want to get started in town or downsize as they're getting older to buy smaller homes, that there's consideration of offering a bonus if people built smaller homes, and then that would be in the covenant. So that's the concept that we're still fleshing out, and it sounds like you guys probably aren't gonna have it in your hands till early October. Does that sound right, Jessica? Because we planned 2 September meetings to kind of make sure that you have it in your hands by early October, but it's gonna take a couple meetings to
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yep.
do it. So that's where that's at.
September 26th.
Any questions or thoughts or direction for those guys that are on both committees there?
I assume you put some sort of limitation on the short-term rentals on these tightly clustered homes.
Not yet, we just started playing with that.
It's a new category.
No, I actually had that,
That would
I
become.
had that thought in the middle of the night. believe it or not.
There needs to be another line on that chart.
to put another twist into it.
Oh, I had that thought late last night. I mean, that's the great thing about doing things with a committee. There's nothing gets missed. Everybody thinks of everything, so.
Right,
Okay,
Okay,
that's
guess
great.
I have the rest of the evening off and you don't yet, so,
thank you, Tara.
Yeah, thank you
you.
very
all
much.
right, thank you.
Take care.
Okay, in the spirit of our rules here, we have 45 minutes to move along this because we gotta get Jessica home.
Yes.
She's here a lot, and John for that matter. Okay, Jess, you want to take this zoning list and go for it, or?
Sure.
Please. Number 1 is short-term rental. Do we have to?
It's number 2.
That's number 2, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think we
so
skip
pretty
right down to
much,
4.
right, pretty much numbers 1 and 2, I mean, 2 and 3, we just discussed. So number 4, this is kind of like a hangover from last year, which John and I discussed this a little bit. And actually the master plan committee discussed it even further with a potential of creating some sort of, heritage commission to include maybe members from the existing historical society, kind of do some sort of transition. So this is just kind of like a placeholder. So just sort of on here for now,
If you
so that I
want to,
don't forget all about it.
if you want to do something with a heritage district or something like that, contact the town of Gilmington. The Gilmington Iron Works historical area is just, it's tight. I mean, they are tight over there, so there'd be some ideas there.
Okay, so we can move over to page 2, number 5. I know John was gonna look into that a little bit. I don't know where you're at with the junkyard.
Well, the thing about
Issue,
it is, I don't know that we need to amend junk motor vehicle. That is the definition directly out of the RSA.
Okay, it was just a
Don't
suggestion
have-
from town council, that's all.
Pardon?
It was a suggestion from town council like a while back.
Yeah, I don't recall the reason he said we should amend that because there's,
Right.
that's what we would use if we went to court. We do not have a definition of junkyard in the zoning ordinance. Primarily because junkyards are not allowed in the town of Alton. So why define something that's not allowed?
It's not allowed.
Oh, there you go.
We've had a lot of that and we're still culling through this. We find definitions and they're not in the table of uses or whatever. Why is it there? We try to keep everything in line with each other. When I do have a junkyard, I use the state definition of junkyard, which is in the RSA in the notice and as a matter of pursuing, because an automotive and truck junk motor vehicle dealer is not the same as the definition of a junkyard.
Right.
A junkyard is defined as a place of storing, keeping, or storing, selling, trading, or otherwise transferring old scrap copper, brass, ropes, rags, paper, trash, junk, but dismantled wrecked motor vehicles and parts thereof. A general junkyard. Whereas this is specific where you're taking cars apart and selling the parts. So but when we have gone over this in the past, but it was said, don't put the definition in here because it's not an allowed use in the town. Now, if you feel differently, that's fine, but that was the recommendation of the previous town attorney. And we handled a couple of those, so.
Okay, yeah, I know you did.
Exactly.
But what if someone has a big building, let's say, and they bring a car in and they dismantle the car and put the parts on the shelf? Does that fall into, because people do that for junkyard?
If they're using it for themselves.
No, this would be for a sale situation.
That was the problem I had over here.
Right.
It's not allowed.
That was prosecuted as a junkyard.
And you
Initially
prevailed on that.
Had written the violation for exactly that. But it all, in the course of the proceedings, they were lumped in together because in addition to, he was storing stuff in addition to selling stuff and whatever.
So that has been cleared and challenged in court and prevailed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually that comes under automotive recycler has been my experience.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's, yeah.
and then some.
Call it recycling because you're a
There's some
good person.
Interesting twists to that. Because one of the accusations was that he was a junk dealer, selling motor vehicles. And his argument was, well, I don't have a place of business. And the place of business is defined as an established place of business that's licensed to do so. Well, I don't have a license to do it. I don't have an established place of business. Lots of things I learned.
That was kind of a shaky defense.
Yeah.
I just haven't got a permit, but I'm doing it.
Yeah, and they're not allowed.
One of the most valuable lessons I learned, they had appealed and to dismiss. And in their motion to dismiss, the judge read through it. He said, maybe, he said, I could see where you're trying to go with this. And maybe if there was a comma here, it would be an arguable point, but the comma is not there. So your point is not arguable.
Ooh. He's a wordsmith, that judge.
So anyways, I learned a lot in 6 years.
Well, the old saying goes, words matter, right?
Huh?
Words matter.
Words matter. Anyways, so
Commas
that's
matter.
why there's no definition of a junkyard in the zoning ordinance because we don't have the use. It's not an allowed use in the town. So that's why it's not there.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea.
I think it should
Yeah.
remain the same then.
Yep. Thank you. Next
So
one.
Number 6. So number 6 is just letting you know that section 326 and 331 don't refer to the stormwater management ordinance. So those were created beforehand.
Yeah.
So they don't reflect that. So I'm just pointing that out. That's probably something I will have to look into.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Number 7, I meant to take this off the list because I don't remember why I put it on there.
okay.
That's review.
It was obviously, I saw something and I didn't write notes.
Scratch
And you're not that old yet.
It's not an age, it's volume.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're full, it's done.
Let's see. So number 8, this is a pretty simple one. So section 355 refers to 5 campsites, but the definition only refers to 2. So that needs to be the same,
Yep.
Keep
Yep.
make that the same.
either or.
So that's just a housekeeping one, basically.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Does it go to 5 or does it go to
It
2?
should go to
Right.
5.
Should go to 5.
It should go up to 5.
Okay.
So I might put that in a separate section like I did last year and talk to town council and see if that's administrative or if that needs to go on the ballot.
Yeah, I'm gonna bet he's gonna say on the ballot, but.
Let's see, so this actually came up in discussions when we were talking about the flexible zoning.
Mhm.
So this area, so we were talking about allowing, more affordable housing, sort of maybe changing, densities and, frontage requirements, things like that. Trying to offer some incentives, and this section, if you wanted to, what was the use on that? Do you remember off the top of your head? There was a particular use that you needed 10 acres in Lakeshore Residential Zone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, outdoor, I think it was outdoor recreation or something.
Something.
Well, that's gonna be a
I
nice
think that
part.
had to do with housing.
10 acres in Lakeshore Residential, that's gonna be a tough find.
13, that had to do with,
Says A.
section, so that's the additional considerations for special exception.
Well, Jess, if you're mentioning Lakeshore Residential Zone, and then you move down here further, total density shall not exceed 1 dwelling unit per acre. If it's a Lakeshore Residential Zone, a lot is 30,000 square feet. Shouldn't we follow the
So that
30,000
was-
square feet?
That was the problem, is that, so I'm looking at the table of uses and looking in the note section that says C section 413. So that had to do with seasonal cabins. Lodging. What else? Those are just the first couple of them that I saw. So that had to do with that discussion of
So that needs to,
offering, yeah,
To be looked
offering
into.
up,
they need to coincide with each other.
yeah, offering up the space for more places for housing. So that's what that was. This another one, next one, section 601, number 10. I crossed it off, but I think John was just gonna confirm something with Tara,
Yeah, I have
On
to talk to
that.
her about
the language. That's what it was.
the enforcement, the ability
Yeah.
for the towns to enforce the
Yeah,
shoreline.
so-
It's the shoreline protection
Yep. So
district.
we feel
and-
like it's okay the way it is. Tara made mention that it may not be, so there's a little bit of clarifying the enforcement of this.
Yeah, our ability,
Yep.
the town's ability to enforce the Shoreline Protection Act, which it is in the statute. It actually here says the authority granted to municipality, okay, back up. Municipality, she felt that would just by, all we've done is refer to the shoreline overlay, the Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act. In our thing where it's in the section 600 here, where it talks about shoreline protection. All we did was just refer right to the statute instead of putting a whole, at one point, the town had their own standards and they did away with them and lined it up with the statute. And her concern was that we didn't have anything that said we had the authority to enforce it as the town. But in the statute, it says municipalities which have a shoreline may enforce provisions of the chapter by issuing cease and disorders or taking people to court.
Isn't the shoreline protection a state reg that we all have to follow?
We have to follow, but the question is, do we as a municipality have the authority to enforce it? That was her question.
Yeah.
Shouldn't
Okay.
Right.
Should we seek legal counsel on that?
No,
Why?
because I have already been down this road
Okay.
with DES and with legal.
Mhm.
And we have, it says here that we may enforce the provisions, which gives us the authority to enforce them if we wish to do so.
Right, and I think part of her rationale for that is if you actually go to 601, it just says CRSA.
Right, see that.
So there's not like the aquifer protection, there's a whole, you know,
Oh, you dropped
there's a
something.
whole section. There's a whole section on that. So it just literally says reference RSA for 83B as amended.
Now,
That's the ordinance.
we ought to hold on this for a little bit too, because I understand that the committee for the master plan wants to increase a lot of things.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So they're right, putting it to the planning board to consider.
Yeah. So,
That's why I didn't take it off. I crossed it off. But I
yeah,
didn't
so you
wanna
can still
take
read
it
it.
off So another sort of
idea.
placeholder that I didn't want to forget about.
So what Tara is saying is that section 601 should go just beyond putting the RSA, but actually doing the wording of the RSA.
Her concern was that, you know, she felt it was easy to argue the town this does not give the town the ability to enforce the same provisions as the state. So that's what I need to talk to her, why she feels that way.
Mhm.
Because it clearly says in the RSA that towns do have the ability to
Yeah.
enforce this. But I don't know, she feels we should have more in the zoning ordinance that specifies that other than just say, go here and read this.
Right.
Because that's what we have right now.
Right.
Yeah, she kind of says, to me, the statement that reference to the 483B says that we are not worried about it because the state's got this.
But that's, okay, well, that's.
That's her, what she says is her reading of it, that,
Right. And that I just picked up through a conversation we were having at a master plan committee meeting. She made mention to it, so I just started jotting.
Well,
down
especially
notes.
when you've already had
Yeah,
history with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But if we put in the specific language,
We take the language from the statute and put it in there.
just put it in there,
Then that.
Because
that may be enough.
because
But I-
that paragraph that says the municipality has the right to enforce it, then becomes part of the record.
I just have a chance to email her and ask.
But it,
Yeah.
I'll contact.
Do you see
her,
where I'm
make
going?
sure
yep,
I
absolutely.
understand exactly what her concern is.
what is her concern, whether or not we can enforce the acts of the state?
She wants to know where we're given the authority to do so.
Where we, and that's why I asked if,
Should that be in the ordinance
yes,
specifically? That's.
Yeah, and a caveat
should
at the end of the RSA, and the town has the capability or make that portion of the RSA bold that the town can do it,
Right.
you know?
So number 10, again, these are just suggestions that, you know, I've been hearing from other planners and whatnot throughout the state over the year, that there's sort of like other uses that are not listed in the table of uses. Let's see, what did I put there? I'm sorry, it's been a while since I typed all this.
municipalities to encourage to adopt land control ordinances and shorelands and water bodies.
No.
Is that what she's
We're on
referring
number
to?
11.
Oh, she said number 10.
Yeah,
I thought we
Oh,
were still on
sorry.
10.
We're on number 11.
I didn't hear 11.
I didn't
I thought we
either.
were still on 10.
I meant
thought we were in
11.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Because I was under
It's
section
okay, I
483.
didn't.
Too
hear
many
it either.
meetings this week.
Yeah, I was still under 483.
And it's early yet.
Let's forget about 11. Let's go to 12.
Let's go to 12. Yeah.
What's a ZO?
Zoning ordinance.
Zoning.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. That,
Not Wizard
I'm aware of
of
that
Oz.
thing.
Opposite of Oz.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
so it just talked about making sort of all the other uses listed as conditional uses.
All right.
I don't know, it was just kind of something else that other towns kind of do, so that way you don't have this endless list of table of uses as time goes on. We can just skip over that one if you
So
want.
number 12, yeah, I mean, that's very clear. A duplex is 2 family and a multifamily is 3 or
Yep.
more.
I think there's some spots in here that didn't get cleaned up from last year. That might
Yeah,
have gotten
and we got to
overlooked
make
a
sure
bit.
that we also catch that we can go up to 5 in a building.
Yeah,
because
that's already, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yep. Just 13, just ongoing review of table uses and definitions and different sections. Make sure they're up to date. Let's see, this next one, number 14, this was something new that I was just talking about the other night at the planning board meeting, to change
Churches.
where churches are allowed. So now. they're-
basically anywhere they
they're
want to
just
be.
Everywhere. So,
Yes, in every zone.
yeah.
Yeah,
And this may just be, we have to talk to the attorney, but I think this can just be an administrative change. This would not have to go before the ballot.
because
This
this,
is already, it's
It-
Right.
preempted.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would like to see under the notes though added, see, 674:76 as may be amended, because I don't think this is going to last very long. I think that this is going to get challenged and
Yeah.
tweaked and.
Yeah.
So,
Completely.
And it went into effect like that.
yeah.
I applied for a 501c immediately when I saw this.
The Church of Frank.
In the house of
God
God.
help us.
Yeah, 'cause you stay away from Frank.
Number 15, so this one talks about the fact that other than the residential rural and the rural zones, all the other zones don't specify how many single-family homes are allowed on a lot.
Clarify that.
Then 16, anything that ZAC members have to propose?
Jump back to 15 for a second.
Yep.
We have that petition article that passed a few years back on, what is it, over 40 acres or
Yep.
45?
Yeah,
And that can just stay. That doesn't need to be.
Okay, so that won't interfere with this?
No, that wouldn't
Nope.
interfere with this because. Rest of.
Okay.
I don't know how much you guys want to tackle with this memo, considering what we just talked about, all the short-term rental changes are a ton.
Yeah,
I think between the short-term rental and the flexible zoning, 2 big chunks.
right.
Yeah.
And we try not to exceed 10.
Right.
And if we have a couple of big ones, we probably should back off from that if we can. Is there anything that you guys feel is in the zoning ordinance that is deadwood that should come out of it?
Honestly, this year I have not had a chance to
Okay,
sit and
we should
browse
try to do that
browse
because
through.
Just go through it.
if we're keeping up to date,
Yeah.
I mean,
I try to do that when I update, once March comes along and things pass or don't pass. And
Yeah.
I'm doing the update, I try to like do it then as I'm going through that entire document to kind of see
yeah,
what's what.
like if there's someone in there that says you only can have 4 horses, and
My thought is that as much as I really want to get something under the historic aspect, that I think we ought to wait and see how the master plan flies. And then maybe this is a next year tackle.
That's a good idea.
that would be a zoning change.
Contentious.
Yes, it would.
Yes.
Yep, because people aren't going to want their houses automatically put in it. and-
Has there been any run at this before or not?
No, there's only a few buildings that are listed on the National Register in town.
Okay.
I think this building is one of them. True Value, 2 doors over, is because that used to be the Masonic Hall back years ago.
Community Community Center.
Yeah, the Bay Community Center, yeah.
Just that
The Bay Fire Station could be on it.
My brief experience of that is just because it's designated historic structure doesn't, depending on how it is designated, doesn't mean a lot in some
Right.
cases.
Right, because the Bay Community Center is what, probably rebuilt in the 40s because the first one burned down.
And we can take
So-
that down if we want.
Right.
Right.
There-
The town has regulations on barns. You go through the assessor's office to
you
apply
can-
for that.
Historic barn, you can get
Yeah.
a
But
reduction
that's,
on your
that's
assessment.
currently the only thing that the town offers for incentives, for holding on to, historic structures.
Yeah. And if you go in the front of the coffee shop there, Aroma Joe's, you'll see a plaque in between the trees. That's the old barn that was there. That used to be the meeting house and everything for town. So,
And that- When we were at the facilities committee today, talking about that lot over there,
Yep,
that barn.
the barn,
That
yeah.
barn is one of the ones that's been granted a historic abatement. And
Which is why they're
if
dismantling it.
that, the Depot Street property, the facilities committee is looking for a place to start putting structures that are gonna upgrade for the highway, police, fire, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
We're in the opening phases. So one of the lots they're considered, and they're having conversations with the owners, is the lot right here behind the police department.
Fury
That
lot.
fronts over the Fiore lot.
Good. Yeah.
And one of the things was, subdivide off the house, take the barn down and build the new highway department.
If you guys get a driveway permit here, he's gonna come unglued,
But I think there's,
He represented that there was
No, there isn't.
I think there's also more wetlands in there
So I
than
got
anticipated.
9
So anyway, but
items.
that was just an aside.
All right, so what, if anything, on this list you guys want to see again at our next meeting, or just short-term rental?
Well, why don't we just
flexible
quickly buzz right down through them, Jess,
Yeah.
and say what,
Definitely the 2 and 3.
Got numbers 2 and 3.
yep.
Um,
Historic
We're
sessions, we're
gonna
gonna hold off
we're
on
gonna
that
hold off on
until we
4.
hear from the
Yeah.
master plan.
5, we're gonna leave alone.
Yep.
Yep.
So number 6, we're gonna look at that.
Yeah, 6, I'd have
Yep.
to do some research on that. I don't know if that's gonna end up back on the list for this year, but I will work on that actively.
Number 8,
Yeah.
for that correction.
Yes.
That's how.
It's just a definitional. thing.
Yep.
Number 9. Particularly with
That,
Yes.
clarifying the
that
density
definitely
of the
needs,
acreage.
that needs some work to
Yeah.
That
be
is-
consistent
Format
with
it out like I usually do, and we can
Yep.
look at that next time.
number 10, that's out.
Yep,
For now.
number 11.
One, we may not need it, we may not want to tackle.
Yeah,
Maybe not
that's a
this year.
question mark.
I can do some more, I can elaborate more
Question
on
mark
that,
on that
maybe have that for next year.
Okay,
Question mark on that one.
12 is more of a housekeeping.
yeah,
Yep.
Yes.
but it probably needs
Needs
to,
to be done.
Yep.
Yes. 13.
13 is kind of a
That's just-
homework session.
yeah, that's the,
Definitely
Uh,
14.
Number 14, we gotta do.
And that we can do today.
yeah.
In
We'll just-
reality, we could do that today because the law is in effect and this is,
Yeah.
we don't need the permission of the voters.
Right,
to do
yeah,
Right.
with legislative changes.
So why don't we do that right this minute? Let's get it done.
Zoning ordinance regulation.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion?
You certainly may. Go Frank, go.
I would like to ask the committee to accept this new law passed recently regarding churches, 674-76, religious use of land and structures. No zoning ordinance or site plan review regulation shall prohibit, regulate, restrict the use of the land or structures, primary use primarily used for religious purposes, provided, however, that such land and structures may be subject to objective and definitive regulations concerning the height of structures, yard sizes, lot areas, setbacks, open space, building coverage requirements, as long as said requirements are applicable regardless of the religious or non-religious nature of the use of the property and do not substantially burden religious exercise. That has been effectively happened through the state's Congress on July 1st of 2022.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on that?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Case change, let's change the language.
There you go. Good, it's done. Jess, you got that in there yet?
So really what if I'm understanding, we're really going to try to focus on short-term rentals and flexible.
And flexible,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And we're
Okay,
going
number
to really
15,
try our best not to confuse our constituencies and try
it
to keep it as simple
Explanation is possible.
as we can so that we don't get too many no's.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use the expression marketing, but it is, I mean, we need to present this in a very logical, understandable manner in snippets.
Right.
And that slowly get more and more detailed.
If not, it'll come right back at us and then we'll be looking at it again next year to revise it.
Right.
And I think Paul would do the same thing like we did with master plan when we were doing the survey. We did that, copied and pasted that one blurb. This is the stuff that you relay to everybody so that everybody's using the same language
Right.
when they're explaining it to the public.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
But just to finish what we were doing, so number 15,
Yeah.
we're also going to
Let-
clean that up.
Let's just, well, what are we gonna clean it up to? I mean,
We're just gonna add in to those other zones that it's one single family home per lot.
okay, the rationale for that.
Was.
It's already established through
Right.
the.
Oh, it's already, that's right, we do.
Two other zones.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make it uniform.
Right.
Yeah.
Consistency.
Yeah,
Is that something we can vote
Do
on
now?
right now?
No.
Well, we'll just get it changed because we don't know, we'll have to show you where those changes are.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to come back and
the
show you where
language,
those
yeah.
changes
So that'd be on the next meeting.
yeah.
So,
And we'll slide right into next meeting. How's that sound?
perfect. Good time.
Everybody pull out your calendars. Please. Okay, we are at August 23rd right now. And Jessica's gonna be the kind of the party pooper this whole thing, because she keeps shooting us down as we try to find available nights.
And we just.
So we'll move into September, shall we?
Yeah, and we scheduled, that was John, that was the 15th for facilities committee, correct? Is that what we did?
Yes, it was.
Okay. It's the 15th.
Okay, on the 12th of September, we have alternative housing at 4 PM.
And
The selectman is after that,
At
so
6.
then the 13th, I know you had some,
CIP,
what time is that?
6.
6. Does 4 o'clock work for anybody here?
Well, one of the things I would, given our workload at the moment,
Yeah, budget.
and
Well,
the
that-
budget's starting and all
That's
that,
gonna be September 21st, the first meeting for the budget.
budget. I'm thinking maybe toward somewhere in that week of the 19th, give us a little more time to.
To get stuff
I
together.
agree, because I'm on vacation next week. So that only leaves me like 4 days to do all that work.
Okay, what does the week of the 19th look like,
Well,
Jess?
the 20th, we have a planning board meeting.
Right,
Right.
we could come in earlier than that. I don't know if you can. Go ahead, Jess.
So Tuesdays, so the 20th is planning board, the 21st is master plan, and after that, there's a joint budget committee and board of selectmen meeting. So the 21st is out,
Mhm.
the 20th. And it's potentially we could do it earlier. It's kind of a hectic night.
Does any,
I can't.
Planning board?
I
It's
can't.
not like
do
it's
the
like a committee meeting. It's kind of a little lighter. than a
Yeah.
board meeting. The 22nd,
I was just gonna ask, is the 22nd a problem?
Thursday, the
Is it
22nd.
Thursday?
I can do the Thursday, the 22nd.
I might
What
not be
time?
here, but
6 again?
Six a good time.
6
That would
or is
work.
4 any better?
6 would be better.
The 23rd.
22nd.
Second.
Thursday, the
Thursday, the 22nd.
Yeah, we're not coming on a Friday night, Frank.
I'm sorry.
You can if you want to.
I will never schedule meetings on a Friday night.
I'll come
Excuse
down
me,
and
Jess?
unlock it for you.
So that's at 4? Or are we doing?
6.
No, 6.
6, September
Sorry.
22nd at 6 o'clock.
9:20.
Is today Wednesday?
Today is
Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Today's Tuesday.
Tuesday?
all day.
I'm right there with you,
Where am
Mark.
I? That's how I missed yesterday.
ZBA.
I'd make a motion, but I don't think I'm allowed to.
We've been through that.
September's filling up fast.
Yeah, it's already booked.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I don't have to do that. What about another meeting? We should try to get 2 out here. And it's gonna push us into October. 'Cause you
when is
need to
our
have a little
next-
time.
So alternative housing, we're meeting on the 12th.
Yes.
Of October.
No, September. So
September.
I'm just trying to figure out.
At
when
4.
When we would
Right.
get flexible zoning. into it.
September 12th at 4. Then September 26th
At 4.
Yep. Okay, so that gives us a couple more meetings to work on flexible zoning.
Yeah,
Mhm.
with Zach
Give it
to this.
Zach. So then we're October, beginning of October.
Well, I am 5th of October. The basically 14th, I'm not here.
Okay.
4th? That work?
Yeah.
Tuesday the 4th.
Fifth,
What
you
day
said
is the
5th to
fourth?
the
What day of the week is it?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay.
But the day before you go on vacation is usually hell. Right? The day before you go on vacation is usually a tough day.
At the top of my list.
Okay, we're looking at the 4th. Feedback,
That sounds fine.
The 4th of October.
6 PM.
Okay.
6 PM. CBA.
And just so that you're, know what's coming up after that. So November 15th, the November meeting is usually the meeting that we have the joint meeting with the planning board. So ZAC and planning board usually has a joint meeting.
Okay,
That would fall on November 15th. So we kind of would have to have things wrapped up to town council to comment on and have ready for the.
pretty much by
15th.
the 1st of November, because he'll need some reaction time.
It's not a lot of time, but it's doable.
So, yeah, so just so that we know what's coming up after that.
Okay,
So we just did September.
22 at 6 PM,
And
October 4 at
6
6 PM.
God,
Dan's card,
I
Frank.
can't believe it.
It's that Thursday that's gonna throw me off. Second.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add? Mr. Bober?
Yes, you skipped over your public input there.
Yep.
Does Alton belong to the New Hampshire Municipal Association?
We do not,
No, not anymore. It's a different,
which we may try to do it again, but
Oh.
at one point, the Board of Selectmen
No.
felt it was inappropriate, so we no longer pay them $3,000.
I don't
Did you
wanna-
just,
I don't want to weigh in on that either way. About it. But they do have a thing that I pulled off the web. It was a spring planning and zoning conference of 2019. It specifically addresses short-term rentals. I realize this is kind of backpedaling at this point, but there's some very interesting things in that publication as I was reading it here during the meeting. And might have our hands tied by some of the state laws on what we can do and can't do.
Can I just clarify something for you, Vince?
But
So you had asked if the town was part of the New Hampshire Municipal Association. So we are.
Back. You're right. I was
We're
wrong.
not part of the Lakes Region Planning. Commission.
Right,
Region
correct.
Commission,
Just to
right.
clarify that. And that
You are right.
conference was offered to all members
okay,
back in the springtime.
well, at any rate, I just.
Yep,
read
That was
some of
an
this.
interesting, yeah, that was interesting
read some-
webinar.
I read some stuff here that might throw a monkey wrench into what we're trying to do on some of the limiting short-term rentals.
And that was before, so that was the springtime. That was, I think that was before it went to legislation to when they started talking about not allowing towns to restrict short-term
Right.
rentals. Yeah,
So the that municipal regulation of the short-term rentals has some things in it that are already covered by state law. And I think they may affect some of the things that we're trying to accomplish here.
The state does this occasionally. Back about 10 years ago, we had to do adult entertainment because if we didn't have a place for it, it was allowed anywhere.
And then the other thing you were talking about, that's the State Bill 69 dealing with the short-term rentals. And that was, I don't know, 2019. And as of this spring, I know it still has not passed.
Right.
So it's still, as long as that chance could pass, it might be interesting to look at those things.
yeah. And we discussed that at the very beginning of alternative housing, that when we picked things back up again, on whether or not we actually wanted to address short-term rentals this year because that bill was pending. And then we decided to move forward with it.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
very hopeful that the state was going to do something and give us some
Yep.
guidance, and they haven't.
Yeah.
And it happened.
That was why, yeah, that's why.
They want all the towns to push their rules through and be challenged and see what sticks.
See what's gonna happen.
And has there been any best practices with other towns in the area in that context? Or
So I think we talked about North Conway, wasn't it, that had done something?
I think you're right.
And Concord.
Portsmouth, Concord, Laconia.
Laconia,
Yeah.
yeah.
Guilford.
Okay.
Recently, Meredith did short-term rental just this past voter, town hall. They amended theirs or created theirs. So there's a number of, more and more municipalities that are
just doing it without.
getting into business.
So can we collect some of those ordinances?
Yeah.
Because I love plagiarism. It's the best
Yeah,
way.
yeah, exactly.
Tara wrote for short-term rental for Waterville Valley and also for Goro.
Yep.
Which gave her a great, because the focuses were different in both towns when it came to that, much because Waterville Valley is tourist town.
Yep.
So those, among other places, that's where she's assisted those towns in writing their short-term rental ordinances.
I think Conway is still battling this through the courts.
Well, we watch who wins in court, and plagiarize them real well.
Mr. O'Brien, anything? No? Okay, anything, anybody else?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
House, all in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation. This is very few towns that I know. I don't know of any other town that does this. This was started by one of our previous planners, the zoning amendment committee, and it has been a very fruitful process over the course of the last